Welcome. My name is Sally Scheidlinger. I'm a social worker and psychotherapist specializing in grief, trauma, anxiety, and LGBTQ specific issues. Today in this video, we're going to be talking about self-compassion. It's part of a number of strategies and tips from the anonymous support group Self-Compassion during COVID-19, where we spend an hour going deeper into this topic. Before we get started, I wanted to thank you for clicking on this video and taking a step toward investing in your mental health. Everything that you're feeling is valid and normal, and you're not alone. So I'm so glad that you have joined me today to talk about self-compassion. Let's get started. So we're going to start by talking about what self-compassion is and what the practice actually looks like. And then I'm going to provide some exercises that you can use in your daily life to start integrating self-compassion every day. And then I'm going to share some resources that will be helpful if you wanted to take a deeper dive into the practice of self-compassion. So what is self-compassion? It's a way of relating to yourself with kindness. It's offering unconditional acceptance of your shortcomings, inadequacies, mistakes, and foregoing judgment. So really treating yourself with kindness, compassion, and active comfort. Dr. Kristin Neff is sort of the pioneer on studies of how self-compassion can improve our mental health. So I'm going to be referring to her work throughout this presentation. She's the person that really brought self-compassion to the forefront of media, pop culture, and therapy. So what she describes as the three core components of self-compassion, the three things that are essential to practicing self-compassion, are mindfulness, cultivating awareness of your thoughts and feelings in a non-judgmental way. So noticing what kind of automatic negative thoughts come up for you, and being able to pinpoint it so that you can sort of tend to it. We can't tend to the thoughts and feelings that we have if we don't know what they are. So the second component of self-compassion is recognizing a common humanity. So recognizing that we all struggle, we all suffer, and that kind of helps to make you feel less alone. The opposite of self-compassion is self-criticism and rumination on, mistakes, inadequacies, and character judgment. What common humanity does is it recognizes, or what practicing common humanity does is that so by recognizing the universal component of our struggles, we're able to feel less alone, because self-criticism tends to isolate us. It makes us feel less than others. Whereas recognizing that everybody struggles kind of helps us to feel like we belong. The third component is self-kindness. So internally responding to yourself and to the negative thoughts with kindness, compassion, and understanding. I think it's also important to take note of the difference between self-esteem and self-compassion. Self-esteem is much more well-known, I think, than self-compassion. And what it is it's determined by how positively we evaluate ourselves and our worth. So it's typically assessed through comparing yourself to others. Now, I don't know if you have had much experience with comparing yourself to others, but I can tell you it is quite a disparaging process for the most part. I think you can find that when you go on social media and you see these perfectly curated pictures of how great life in quarantine has been for some people and all the wonderful hobbies and skills they've picked up. Comparison usually doesn't feel good. So what self-compassion does is it operates not based on evaluation. It's a way of just relating to yourself. So it's a way of kind of soothing and tending to your negative feelings by treating yourself differently. So some of the benefits of cultivating self-compassion that Kristin Neff found in her research were that, number one, it improves relationship dynamics. So if you're actively comforting yourself after a difficult time, you're then able to have some more mental capacity to be able to be there for somebody else. You're independently soothing yourself, and so you're not stuck in this rumination, these thought spirals that can kind of get in the way of relationships, right? Number two, it helps you to rise from challenges. So if you're if you have a negative feeling or a negative thought, like I'm so unproductive, you probably feel guilty about that, right? And then if you start to ruminate or criticize yourself for being unproductive, then you have this second difficult feeling. So that's what happens when you self-criticize. When you use self-compassion, you start with the negative feeling, I'm unproductive, with negative thought, I'm unproductive. And then you actively tend to that first negative feeling. So it helps you to bounce back much quicker, and to rise from challenges much quicker than the alternative. Number 3, by practicing self-compassion, you'll be less likely to depend on others to determine your self-worth, less likely to need validation from other people because you're always kind of soothing and tending to yourself independently. That's the ideal, right? To be able to independently soothe yourself and improve your self-worth, your sense of self-worth along the way. Number 4 is that self-compassion improves motivation. So it allows us to tend to our first negative thought and then free up space to accomplish your goals. A lot of people, when they first hear about self-compassion, think, well, that's going to make me complacent, isn't it? If I'm just constantly telling myself it's okay that you were unproductive today, and comforting myself for this thing that I did that I wish I didn't do, then I'm just going to be complacent. I'm not going to get better at it. And what the research shows is that it's actually quite the opposite. That by using self-criticism and beating yourself up, that kind of prolongs the process and doesn't really make you feel super motivated to go do the thing you wanted to do if you've just spent an hour beating yourself up over it. But if you're practicing self-compassion, you do have a little bit more space and a little bit more mental energy to accomplish the things that you want to do. So it really does improve motivation. There's also a biological component to self-kindness and self-compassion. It increases our oxytocin, the hormone for love and bonding. That's actually that's the hormone that gets released when mothers are breastfeeding their babies. It's the hormone that gets released when you give your friend a hug. It increases our capacity for trust, safety, and calm while reducing fear and anxiety. Self-criticism does kind of the exact opposite. It affects our amygdala, which is the part of our brain that triggers our fight or flight responses. So it's our smoke detector that detects threats. So if your brain is detecting something threatening, your body's either going to need to fight or getting prepared to flee. So it's this constant kind of state of perpetual anxiety. So oxytocin, quite the opposite, really helping to build feelings of safety and feelings of calm. So now that you've learned a little bit about what self-compassion is, I'd like to give you some exercises to try to practice it at home. So the first exercise, I'm going to ask you to kind of take a look at what your own automatic negative thoughts are. So automatic negative thoughts are self-critical. They're often pervasive and come up sometimes without prompting. Some examples are, I'm so stupid. Of course, this would happen to me. I deserve it. Typical me, I messed up everything. So I want you to think about what are some negative thoughts that often come up for you. What's one that you can practice being self-compassionate towards? Pick one. And now we're going to respond to that thought with kindness. So first step in responding with kindness is noticing the critical voice, which you just did. What are the thoughts saying? What exactly are you criticizing yourself about? Kind of get curious about it. Where did it begin? What's the tone? Why is this one thought so pervasive? Did somebody say something to you when you were younger that triggered it? It's important to put some space between you and the thought by getting curious about it, so that you don't start to over-identify with the thought. Because once we over-identify with it, we start looking at our mistakes as personal failings when they're just mistakes, and we're humans and we all make mistakes. The next step is to compassionately respond to the negative thought. So not responding with shame, like, oh, here's a negative thought again. I'm supposed to be practicing self-compassion. How could I be so negative? Try to steer clear from that. You want to respond with something kind. So please stop being so critical. You are causing me unnecessary pain. The third step is to then talk to yourself as if you were comforting a close friend or a child. So Oftentimes we're so critical of ourselves and we can be so mean to ourselves, but we would never say some of the things that we say to ourselves to a friend that was struggling, right? So talk to yourself, respond to that negative thought with kindness and as you would a close friend. So an example of what this might look like is, say the thought is, I procrastinated all day and I didn't get my work done. I'm so lazy. So there's the negative thought. And then a way to that you can respond to yourself as if you were comforting a close friend would be, I'm so sorry that you're having such a hard time right now. I know that this is something that really bothers you because you really want to do well. You're trying to work through a global crisis, civil unrest, so many different things going on in the world that are making it very difficult to focus. How can I support you in this moment? How can I comfort you? How can I be there for you? That's the internal monologue that you want to, or dialogue, I guess, that you want to start practicing. And notice how it feels in your body when you do respond like that, as opposed to responding with self-criticism. I think you'll notice that it's quite a big difference. The last exercise that I'd like to share with you is taking a self-compassion break. And I'd like for you to try it with me right now, if you're willing. So I'd like for you to bring up a situation or interaction with someone that makes you feel moderately bad. So nothing too triggering, nothing too benign. Just visualize it in your mind's eye until you feel a bit of discomfort. You can close your eyes if you're more comfortable, or you can keep them open. Say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. So that's the mindfulness piece. You're labeling it and noticing it. And then I want you to say to yourself, suffering is a part of life. Everybody suffers. It's recognizing the common humanity and that you're not alone. Now I want you to place your hands over your heart. Notice the sensations you feel on your hand. Is it warm? Do you feel the beating of your heart? Really try to feel connected. And I'd like for you to say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. That's the self-kindness piece. And you might need to hear something else. Maybe you can add a few more affirmations that you most need to hear right now. Maybe it's, may I be safe enough in this moment. May I live with ease. May I be happy. And when you're ready, slowly come back into the room and just notice how you're feeling. You can try this anytime. It takes like 5 minutes, and the more you practice it, the more you're training your brain to respond in a compassionate way. So I wanted to share with you my resources. Of course, I highly recommend Kristen Neff's book, The Self-Compassion, the Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. It's a great place to dig deeper into some of these concepts. And also, there's a wonderful exercise resource list, this Hurley and Rockman resource. You can just click that link and get right to it. It has a lot of self-compassion journal exercises, mindfulness exercises. It's a wonderful resource. And then an article on self-compassion on Psychology Today on how to cultivate more self-compassion. All very helpful resources. Thank you so much for listening. If you found that helpful, join me and other licensed mental health professionals for anonymous support groups, which cover a range of popular topics: trouble sleeping, mindfulness for anxiety, relationships, concentration, and more. What is an anonymous support group, you ask? It's the way that Hims and Hers is working to bring better mental health to more people. There's sessions that will help you learn effective coping strategies and help with common concerns. And you can use any name and decide to chat and keep your video off. It can be as anonymous as you'd like for it to be. Go to forhims.com or forhers.com to explore the sessions and more mental health products. Thank you.